Hey everyone, it's time to review round 8 of the 2025 NRL season. A pretty controversial round overall. 18 sin bins, every game was impacted by them. In this video, we're going to break down each matchup. We're going to go through each game from a betting perspective. Was the market right or wrong in terms of what way it moved? Who covered the spread? Did games go over or under? And what are the trends for these sides going forward? We're also going to look at what contributed to these teams. I'm going to go through each team from each game, go through what they did well, where they need to improve, and those emerging patterns for them that are starting to show up on the season. If they're consistently making errors, are they completing at a low rate? Are they having a lot of plays inside the 20-meter zone and not converting into points? Those are just like some of the examples of things we'll go through in this video. So that going into round 9, which is Magic Round next week, you have a better picture of these sides. There'll also be a video later in the week where we'll go through the betting trends for the games in round 9, plus the try scorers, which have been going really well lately. So make sure you stay tuned on the channel for those videos, subscribe, turn on the notifications, so as soon as those videos are posted, you are able to watch them and get that information to help you profit on the NRL this season. In round 8, we had 4 games go over, 4 games go under, so exact even split. Overall in the season, 37 games have gone under, 27 games have gone over. So overall in the season, it's definitely favoring the lowest scoring side of games. Home teams won 7 of the 8 games this weekend. It was only the Seagulls beating Penrith, being the only away team to win. Obviously, next weekend, pretty much every side, apart from the Broncos, will be effectively playing away from home. Home teams covered the spread in 6 of the 8 games. Home teams covered the spread in 6 of the 8 games. Only the Rabbitohs and the Seagulls were the away teams to cover the spread this weekend. Overall in the season, home teams are 36-28 against the spread. Favourites won 5 of the 8 games. So Broncos beating the Bulldogs 42-18. Manly beating Penrith 26-10, and then the Tigers beating the Sharks in Golden Point 20-18. They were the 3 underdogs to win. Favourites covered half the games. Underdogs covered half the games on the weekend as well. Underdogs are now 33-31, so slightly better record against the spread overall on the season. Looking at the first game Thursday night, this game was played in a lot of rain and the market tried to adjust for that. So the total moved down from 42.5 down to 39.5. Broncos covered the total, went over themselves, but 60 points scored total in the game. And Broncos won and covered the spread as underdogs here, but they drifted from 240 out to 245. So market got this game wrong on both sides of the ledger. Brisbane bounced back from 2 losses as favourites. They are the underdog for the first time this season and won in dominant fashion against a Bulldogs side that doesn't give up points. Well, they certainly didn't in this game. This was their 3rd cover of the season for Brisbane. They're now 3-5 against the spread overall. For the Bulldogs, their first loss, so this broke their 6-game winning streak to start the season. Also their first time trailing at halftime, their most points conceded on the season, and also their first game to go over the total since round 2 against the Gold Coast Titans. Overall for this game, this was a huge win by the Broncos in front of a big crowd, over 40,000 considering the conditions that this game was played in. A game that also had 4 sin bins. Bulldogs had 2 in the first half, 1 early in the second, and then Broncos Dean Mariner sent in the 72nd minute. Broncos scored 6 unanswered tries in the first half. So 6 of their 7 tries all came in the first half. Xavier Wilson went over in the first minute, closely followed by Reynolds, Mariner, and 10 minutes, 12 minutes into this game, Brisbane were already leading 8. And even at that point, like, you still felt like Bulldogs are in a chance here. Like, they'll regroup, get their defense in order, slow start, tricky conditions, coming off a big game, big win last week in front of a big crowd. But it's just an overall huge letdown game for the Bulldogs. They trailed 34-0 at halftime. They did score 3 tries to 1 in the second half and did score whilst they were down amounts. Jacob Preston scored whilst Marcelo Montoya was in the sin bin. But considering for the Broncos, they scored 2 tries during this period where Josh Curran was sin bin, and then when Tupanua was sin bin, the Broncos didn't score, so they covered that period alright. But at 34-0 at halftime in those conditions, there was no real way back for them. Broncos scored a late try through Billy Walters, so he's now scored in back-to-back weeks. Looking at the stats for this game, Broncos played very well. They're definitely up for this game, that's for sure. Mike Maguire got the team regrouped from the trip to New Zealand. They're on a quick turnaround. It wasn't an ideal situation, but a really good performance. I think Broncos were up for this game, and it was a real letdown for the Bulldogs after last week. I think that's what really contributed to a 24-point margin. Brisbane, 56% possession, 83% completion rate, both really good numbers, and just making, I think it was 8 errors for this game in really tough conditions. Both sides did well at handling the ball. Surprising that we didn't see 12, 13, 14 errors in this game, considering that. For Broncos, defensively very strong, just missing 10 tackles overall, and just 3 line breaks conceded for this game, which is very, very good. Overall, looking at the season for Brisbane, they've now just conceded 4 line breaks or more in one game. Broncos have the Panthers on Sunday. They'll go into that game with 10 days rest. The way Penrith are playing, they'll definitely give themselves a big shot at winning that game, especially at home. Bulldogs, this was like a typical letdown game after a big win in front of a big crowd. They were super undisciplined, giving away those 3 sin bins, 2 of them in the first half, and they couldn't stop that Broncos momentum through that first half. They only made 10 tackle breaks in this game, so when I mentioned those Broncos missed tackles, that's by far the Bulldogs' lowest on the season. They were averaging 32.5 tackle breaks per game going into this matchup. They'll have 10 days rest as well before playing the Titans this week in Brisbane again. So back-to-back games at Suncorp for them. It'll be interesting how they go into that game after the way they ended the matchup against the Broncos on Thursday. But I expect they'll regroup. I'll cover that game when we get to it. Roosters versus Dragons, the first game of 3 on Friday. Roosters big winners 46-18. Roosters won and covered. They're $1.90 into $1.85, and the game went over 45.5. This was the highest score of the season for the Sydney Roosters. They were favourite for just the second time all year, which is definitely interesting for a side that finished in the top 3 last year. Covered the spread in all 3 wins and non-cover in all losses. But obviously they've been an underdog a number of times as well. This was the most points the Dragons have conceded in any game this year. Overall, impressive win by the Roosters. Started with an early try to Sandon Smith, who had a very good game. If you look at the player stats here for him in this matchup, 22 points, 2 tries, 5 conversions, 2 penalty goals. All really good numbers. 3 line breaks, 1 try assist, 3 tackle breaks as you go through. Really, really good numbers overall for him. Looking to cement his spot there in the halves with the departure of Keary for the Roosters. Early on, Roosters started really well, so they went try for try early, but late in this second half, Quini Tawaze scored, then Sandon Smith got his second try just before halftime. Roosters went in 20-6. Sandon Smith was sin-binned here in the 44th minute. Now, this was the ideal opportunity for the Dragons to fight back. They're only down by 14. They have an extra player on the field. If they could grab 1 or even 2 tries during this period, convert both, now it's a 2-point game, and with Valentine Holmes kicking, they're likely going to be converted. So if Dragons could just find 2 tries during that period early in the second, this game could have taken a totally different turn. Instead, Blake Steep scores. That extends the margin even further out to over 20 points for the game. Carl Flanagan got a good try to come back, but from that point, the game was all but over. Tedesco scored his first try, getting his first try of the season as well. Scored a second later on in the game, but Roosters running out comfortable winners in the end with those 2 late tries. For the stats for this game, Roosters 55% possession, completed at 81%. Both really good numbers for the Roosters. Made their most line breaks of the year with 10 and conceded just 4 line breaks overall, which they hadn't given up more than 4 line breaks now in the last 6 weeks. So defensively, Roosters looking a lot better. Still made 13 errors in the game, which is slightly above their average, but they didn't compound that with giving up a lot of penalties. So just 3 penalties overall for the Roosters, which was their lowest number of the season, and also their equal highest penalties received at 6. Roosters have a good matchup against the Dolphins this week, and then they'll have the bye after that, and they'll be back to play the Bulldogs. So if they can grab the game against the Dolphins this week, go into the bye, be well rested to face the Bulldogs. If they play the way they did in this game, you definitely give them some sort of a chance in both of those games, especially against the Dolphins this week. Dragons of this game, like disappointing performance, especially defensively, giving up those 10 line breaks, considering they'd only given up 5 total line breaks across their last 2 games. Struggled to generate meters here, just the 1400 meters overall, which was their lowest number of the year. Also, by far their lowest post-contact meters, under 400. They've been averaging 564 post-contact meters, so well down on that. Dragons still the only side this year yet to have a player set to the sin bin. Not sure how long that's going to last if the number of sin bins continue in the double digits going forward, but just wanted to point that out as I did notice when I was looking through the rankings. Dragons will play the Tigers this week on Saturday night, so an interesting game there for both those sides, fairly evenly matched. Warriors at home beat the Knights 26-12 in another game that there were a lot of stop-starts, especially in the first half. Like the first half of this game felt like it went on for 2 sin bins in the first 4 minutes. The Warriors were the only side to capitalize during that period though. Adam Pompey scoring the first try in the 8th minute. Jackson Ford scored 2 late tries to put the Warriors up 16-0 at halftime. Knights did have 2 disallowed tries during that first half, but were kept scoreless once again. It's now the 5th time this season they haven't scored any points in a first half. Newcastle scored first in the second half in that 49th minute, James Schiller going down that right side. And they kind of got themselves somewhat back in the game, but needed to get the next try, which they didn't. Wade Egan scored. Then Adam Pompey got his second, and Warriors led 26 points to 6 with only less than 10 minutes to go. Brodie Jones scored a late try, which the Knights do have a habit of doing, but still lost the game by 14 points. Warriors covered the spread. They won $1.45 into $1.36, and the game went under 42.5. Another Knights game going under, moved down from 44.5 down to 42.5. Warriors have won and covered 5 of their last 6. The only loss was the game against the Storm in Melbourne. Last 2 games have gone under the total, both played in New Zealand. 5th straight loss for Newcastle. They failed to cover the spread in each of those games as well. 4 of them being as underdogs, so that's important to highlight. Teams can be losing games, but they can still cover the spread, especially when they're an underdog, obviously. And Newcastle have been underdogs in 4 of those 5 games, but failed to cover in any of them. 6 of their 7 games have gone under the total. For the Warriors, they once again had the better field position, like they've had in every single game so far this season. They had 7 line breaks to 3, which is the most that they've had this year, and 3 conceded was their equal least number of line breaks. Solid run meters at the 1900 mark, and only made 9 errors in this game, which is good to see for the Warriors, as their past couple of weeks have had 14 and 13 errors. Have started giving away a lot more set restarts. So in this game, they gave away 5 set restarts, see 4 ruck infringements and 1 inside the 10 meters. Through their first 3 games of the season, they're only giving away 1.3 set restarts, but the last 4 weeks, that number has jumped to 4.5 set restarts per game. Definitely something they need to bring back in a little bit, as those set restarts can be very costly, especially if you give a couple back-to-back. They have an interesting game against the Cowboys this week. That'll be a good test for both sides who come into this game in good form. For the Knights, I'm still unable to find points, especially early on in games, just averaging 3.4 points in the first halves, and not even 1 point, so 0.8 across their past 5 games. You got to go back to the game against the Dolphins where they scored 20, but since then, they've only scored 4 points, which was against the Sharks last week, giving them a 0.8 average first half points across the past 5 weeks, which makes it very hard to win games as you're just always trailing at halftime. They made another 15 errors in this game. I spoke about this in last week's, probably the week before, review. It's just the issue that's causing them to have no field position and give other teams really good opportunities. They've had 15 or more errors in 6 of 7 games this season, which results in them having less possession as well. And they've had less possession, so this metric up here, they've had less of the possession in every single game this year, and that doesn't help their attack either. They've conceded 20 plus points in their last 5 games. The 7 line breaks they conceded was their most that they've had this year, and now also starting to miss over 30 tackles a game, which hasn't been like something they were doing earlier on in the year. You can see this opposition run meters has also risen recently, and they're giving up close to that 2,000 mark in each of their last 4 games. They traveled to New Zealand last week. They'll travel up to Brisbane this week. So back-to-back road games for them. They do get an 8-day turnaround. So that's the positive in their favour, which will be equal to the Rabbitohs, who they play this week. Melbourne got their win following the loss, beating the Rabbitohs 24 points to 16. Storm won the game, but Rabbitohs covered. Storm were $1.17 out to $1.18. The game went under 46.5 and moved down through the week from 48.5. Storm bounced back as expected, but have failed to cover the spread in 4 of their past 6 games. So just doing enough to win games. For the Rabbitohs, third straight loss. They've conceded 24 plus in each of those 3 games and failed to score over 16 points in each. Just the one extra try for Melbourne, 4 tries to 3. So it's a fairly even game. Not a great deal between the two sides. 2 tries each in the first half. It was 10-10 at halftime. Unfortunately, on that late try to Xavier Coates, Pappenhausen on the conversion hit the post from the sideline, which meant we lost the bet in this game. Otherwise, we would have picked up this one. Into the second half, Alicia Kantoa scored straight after halftime to put the Storm in front. They also got the next try through Tyron Wishart. Latrell Mitchell was sin bin in the 49th minute, but the Storm couldn't capitalise on that. And then Rabbitohs got a late try through Jack Whiten, whilst Pappenhausen was sin bin in that last 10 minutes. When they got that try, it still kind of felt a little bit out of reach because it was more than a converted try. Had they only been down by 6 points here, definitely would have made that final 5 minutes a little bit more interesting. But Storm were just that little bit too good overall in the end, and the Rabbitohs couldn't bridge that margin. Just don't quite have enough points in them. Storm, though, had the majority of possession, and statistically, when you look at this, 7 line breaks, almost 80% completion, you would have thought they could get a little bit more points. 48 tackle breaks, all really, really good numbers, but still just 4 tries overall, so that's a bit of a credit to the Rabbitohs' defense. Storm did make 14 errors in this game. They have been a high error side this season, and something like I'm sure Craig Bailey wants them to have sorted out. Storm also lost the penalty count for the 3rd straight week. Even though they did make the 14 errors, they still completed at 79%, which is above their season average. They'll go into a 9-day rest here before playing the Raiders. They'll have a 2-day rest advantage for that game as Canberra played on the Sunday this week. For the Rabbitohs, another bit of a struggle in attack, averaging just 10 points over the past 3 weeks. Were held scoreless though by the Bulldogs last week, which kept that number down. This was definitely a better performance overall, but they're struggling to generate meters in the forwards. This number's just consistently dropped throughout the season, 1,382 this week. Then past 2 weeks are well down on their overall average, so an area for the Rabbitohs forward pack to sort out. Rabbitohs did miss 48 tackles in this game, which is an equal season high, and something I'm sure Bennett's not happy with. But against the Storm, not super concerning, as they're a good team at breaking tackles, but you wouldn't want to see that happen against the Knights this week, who's the team that they'll face. Newcastle, as mentioned, travelling back from New Zealand. Cowboys ran out big winners, 50-18 over the Gold Coast Titans. North Queensland won, covered, and were $1.45 into $1.35, and the game went over 49.5. Cowboys got there themselves. 4th straight win for the Cowboys. They've covered their last 5. Titans, this was their 5th straight loss, and they now failed to cover their last 4, 3 of those as underdogs. This game was an exact mirror for the Titans from last week against the Raiders. Titans started really well. So Clifford scored the first try for the Cowboys. They led 6-0, but then they had this 5-minute period here, Gold Coast, where they scored 3 tries. They got themselves out to a 16-6 lead. There's also a penalty goal here in the 30th minute, so they're leading 18 points to 6 with 10 minutes to go till halftime. They gave up a try to Jeremiah Nana, who brought the margin back to 6 points, but the Titans were still in front. Very similar to what they did against Canberra last week. They scored 3 quick tries, built a lead, but technically did worse at defending the lead this week. They gave up 7 tries to none in the second half. Cowboys absolutely dominated that period. We'll go through some of the stats in a second, but 38-0 second half to North Queensland, pushed that margin right out to 32 points in the end, and a dominant win at home for the Cowboys, which they scored a season high 50 points. They had 13 line breaks. Most of these are all season highs. 48 tackle breaks, 2,100 run meters, plus 700 there over the Titans. An extra 100 post-contact meters as well. 15 offloads are definitely a high number there, and also only missed 18 tackles. Pretty much Almost all the stats here for the Cowboys are the best they've done overall in the season, so a really, really good performance. 4 wins in a row, traveling really well. Sets up a great matchup against the Warriors this week. One thing I did want to mention is these missed tackles at 18. This area is definitely improved for them. The past 2 games, obviously they had the bye last week, but then if you add in the week prior, they only had 17 missed tackles in that game. But through the first 5 weeks of the season, they were averaging 35.8 missed tackles. So they've got that number right down over the past couple of weeks. If they can continue that, that's going to be really good going forward. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the game with them and the Warriors this weekend. I think it could be one of the games of the round. Warriors on the road definitely gives Cowboys that bit of an advantage. Like, both teams are traveling, but Cowboys can travel better than the Warriors have been in recent times. Warriors play a lot better over in New Zealand. For the Titans here, they're really struggling to play like a complete game. It's been an issue kind of the whole season. They've conceded 30 plus in each of their last 4 games as well. Missed 48 tackles here, which was a season high. And same was that 13 line breaks that goes for that as well that they conceded. Only managed 4 of their own, so -9 in line breaks. They now, with those 4 lane breaks, keeps them in the second last ranking. And they're also struggling to break tackles. So not only getting line breaks, but also breaking tackles. For the Titans, at least, like, they're not making errors. Just 7 errors in this game, which was their lowest error count on the year. Not that it really mattered when you look at the scoreline in the end. Doesn't really get any easier for the Titans. They've lost 5 straight games and now have to play the Bulldogs, who are obviously going to be very keen to bounce back after their loss last week. Seagulls beat the Panthers, the only underdog to win the game outright, 26-10. Manly won, covered. They were 310 into 250, and the game went under 46.5, but no line movement on the total. Panthers are now 2-6 on the season and sit last on the ladder. They've failed to cover 4 of their last 5. 4 of those 5 games have also gone under the total. Both their wins for Penrith this year have gone over the total. For Manly, their first win since round 4 against Parramatta, which coincides with the return of Tom Trbojevic. That was the game he got injured in, has missed the last 3. They lost all those 3. He comes back, they win the game. Manly's last 3 games have also gone under the total. Overall, this was a strong win by Manly. They scored 2 early tries, Ruben Garrick and Tommy Talau. A little bit annoying we didn't back Garrick in this game, spoke about in the try scorer preview. But Manly got those 2 early tries, plus penalty goal, led 14-0 at halftime. Scott Sorensen was sin-binned for Penrith in the 32nd minute, but Manly didn't capitalise during that period. They definitely capitalised when Alamotti was sin-binned, scoring 2 tries during that 10-minute period. However, after halftime, it was 14-0 to Manly. Penrith got the next 2 tries. One of them was converted, so it was back to a 14-10 margin with half an hour to go in that game. And at that point, now look back to anyone's contest. But this sin bin here from Alamotti was the costly factor. Those 2 tries pushed the margin right back out. Also a penalty goal during that time. And that was enough for the Seagulls to hang on and get the win on the board. For Penrith, another poor attacking performance. They scoring just 10 points, which now makes it their last 4 of their last 5 games that failed to exceed 18 points, which isn't enough to win a game really against anyone. Again, it may be enough to beat like Newcastle or something, who struggle to score themselves. But against the majority of the competition, it's not going to be enough. They had their lowest meters gained of the season at the 13.78, and also conceded the most penalties that they have all year, conceding 9 penalties for this matchup. And also didn't benefit from their opponent making mistakes. The Seagulls just making 6 errors, and also Manly completed at 88%. So Penrith really needed to do everything right. 2 sin bins doesn't help. They're going to need to be a lot better this week to beat the Broncos in Brisbane, who will also have a 2-day rest advantage on them and don't need to travel. Seagulls, this was a near perfectly complete performance. They did what they needed to do to beat Penrith here and responded when they needed to in that second half. They won the meters battle and made the least missed tackles. The Seagulls won the meters gain battle, about plus 150 in that area, plus 110 in post-contact meters, which is something they've really lifted over the past couple of weeks, going from a 525 average to a 632 average across their past 2 games. So positive signs for the Seagulls forward pack. They have the bye this week, so won't play in Magic Round. But then we'll play the Sharks again, who they played 3 weeks ago and lost to in Perth, 24 points to 18. On Sunday, the first of two games, a bit of a shootout this one. Raiders winning 40 points to 28. And Raiders won and covered. They're $1.56 into $1.47. The game went over and moved up from 48.5 to 49.5. Mark got it spot on. This was a game very similar. I thought like the Titans-Cowboys game was similar to the Titans-Raiders game from last week. This Raiders-Dolphins game was very similar to that Raiders-Titans game as well. Dolphins got off to a real quick start. So once again, Canberra got away slowly to kickstart the game. Dolphins scored 5 tries just to the Raiders 2 tries in that first half. There was the period here where after conceding the first try, Redcliffe scored 5 of the next 6 tries in the game. They went into halftime leading 28-10. This was also more impressive because Cody Nikorima was sin-binned in the 7th minute, and they did score a try during that period and conceded one. So they got through having a man down for 10 minutes and still led 28-10. And you would expect like from there it'd be very hard to lose the game. However, the Raiders scored 5 unanswered tries in the second half to end up winning that second half 30 points to 0 and win the game very comfortably. This was a 4th straight win for Canberra. They've covered all 4 games. 5 of their last 7 have gone over. Dolphins ended their 3-game winning streak going into this was also the most points they've conceded this season. Canberra did to them exactly what the Dolphins did to the Storm last week. Like Storm got away early on Redcliffe and they responded, scoring I think it was 7 straight tries. Raiders trailed early, trailed by 18 and then scored 5 straight tries of their own. It's funny how these team performances are somewhat mirroring each other a little bit from week to week at the moment. Raiders, of their struggles in the first half has been a bit of a pattern all season. They've only led at halftime once in their past 6 games. But they didn't give up here. Like they kept on trying and very good second half. 30 points to 0. 30 points was a season high in the second half. Also conceding 0 points in the second half. That was the first time they've done that this season. Completed at 87%. Extremely good completion rate. Just 5 errors for the game. Had an equal high 8 line breaks on the game and kept at the 44 tackle breaks, which keeps them in the number 1 ranking in terms of tackle breaks for the year. They'll have the Storm on Sunday, which sets up a really good game to close out Magic Round and the way those two sides are playing this year. In particular, Canberra getting what we expected out of Melbourne, but Canberra have been the side that have gone to another level this season. Dolphins, great first half by Redcliffe, and realistically like that 28-10 lead should have just about been enough to get them over the line. If they defended in the second half, didn't make mistakes, and maybe scored 1 try, they'd win the game. Instead, they had 39% possession, conceded 6 line breaks, only had 5 tackles down inside the Raiders' 20-meter zone. They had 8 errors in the second half and also conceded 5 set restarts and didn't get any of their own. They missed 31 tackles in the second half, so just like everything that could go wrong and that was bad happened to the Dolphins in that second half. And obviously that 30 points they conceded was the most they've conceded in the second half this season. Important game for them this week against the Roosters, which will be on Friday night. It's going to be a 5-day turnaround for Redcliffe traveling back from Canberra, and they'll have a 2-day rest disadvantage. So at least it's more of a home game for them than it is the Roosters. So that's definitely in their favor, but it's not an ideal setup going into this week. And then final game of the round went to Golden Point. Tigers got the penalty from the Tom Hazelton strip, kicked the penalty goal, win the game. Tigers win and cover the spread as underdogs, $2.90 to $2.68. And the game went under the 44.5, which moved down from 46.5 throughout the week. 4th win for the Tigers this season. They're now 4-5 on the year, 5-3 against the spread. This was a bad loss to the Sharks, like similar to the game against the Raiders back in round 5. They had their chances to win, but couldn't get it done when it mattered, and then 6 of their last 7 games have gone under the total. 3 tries each in the first half. Tigers scored 2 tries, the Sharks 1. West led 10-0, and then Ronaldo Militao scored a very good, mostly individual effort try, breaking the line and beating the tackles and slamming the ball down under the post right on halftime. That brought the margin back to 4 points. Tigers scored first after halftime while Britain Nikora was sin-binned, which pushed the Tigers further in front. They're leading 18 points to 6 at that stage. William Kennedy scored a good long-range try, then Billy Burns scored whilst the Tigers were down a man, and it was 18 all with just about 15 minutes to go in this game. Through the final 5 minutes, both sides had chances. Sharks definitely had the better of the chances late in that game, but were unable to convert. And when I say it was similar to the game against the Raiders, you might remember if you watched the review of that game. In that game, Braden Trindle had the opportunity to pass out on that left edge and they score and win the game against Canberra. Instead, he elected to go himself, took the tackle, Canberra go down the other end and score. In this game, in very close to being the final play of the 80 minutes for the Sharks, Trindle had the ball once again in a very, very similar situation in the exact same part of the field. Sharks had a 3-on-2 outnumber on that left edge. Steve Talakai did run through as a decoy and made contact with the Tigers defender, so might have been brought back anyway, but regardless, Sharks had a 3-on-2 outnumber on that left edge. Trindle, all he had to do was draw and pass and probably nearly could have gone himself this time and actually scored the try. Instead, he just gave an early ball to Dan Atkinson, who then tried to score himself and ended up losing the ball, but that definitely should have resulted in a try, or at worst case scenario, a try that was then ruled a no try on the video ref. Instead, they got nothing. It goes to golden point, and then they give away a stupid penalty right in front that Tigers convert to win the game. For this matchup, Tigers had the majority of the possession here with the 53%, completed very well at 82%, had a lot more of the ball. Like, even though it was only 53% possession, they had 238 runs to 192. So roughly plus 35, plus 36 runs. Meters were even though. So Sharks made meters when they had the ball, they just needed more of it. And Sharks, their critical error here was giving up 15 errors and 10 penalties in this game. But overall, better defensive performance by the Tigers after a couple of games recently where they've conceded 7 tries. This game, they had a lot of ball on the try line, but neither side really was able to make much use of it. They did receive 10 penalties in each of their last 2 games, which puts the Tigers at the top of the penalties received rankings. They'll be on a 2-day rest disadvantage when they play the Dragons on Saturday this week. For the Sharks, this was a game where a range of errors, discipline, and just overall execution in key moments cost them a season high 15 errors and also a season high 10 penalties conceded. Going into this game, they were conceding just 4.7 penalties, so more than double their average. They had 43 plays inside the Tigers' 20-meter zone, but only managed 1 try from that, whilst the Tigers were down a player. Their other 2 tries were from halfway or beyond halfway efforts. They have a quick turnaround this week. They'll play the Eels on Friday night, so a 5-day turnaround, their second of the season. Their other 5-day turnaround that they had was against Canberra, which they lost that game 24-20. Eels go into it off the bye, which gives them a significant advantage and extra rest compared to the Sharks setup. So not like the greatest scheduling in terms of the Sharks going into this game. So that's my look at each of the games. Looking at the ladder as it currently stands, Bulldogs still on top on 14 points, followed by the Storm, Raiders, and Warriors. But the Warriors overall have a negative point differential. Broncos, Cowboys on 10 points. Cowboys also have a negative differential. Those 2 teams definitely need to find some big wins to push that number up. As the way this season's kind of shaping up, there's not a great deal between a lot of sides in terms of 5th through to 11th as it currently stands. But obviously we're very early on in the season. Sharks, Seagulls, Tigers, Dragons, Rabbitohs, all on 8 competition points in that group of sides sitting on the fringe of the top 8. Magic round coming up this weekend. I'll be posting a preview going through all the games, looking at the betting trends for these matchups, so stay tuned for that. We posted the channel, and then the try scorer preview where I'll go through all the most likely try scorers for every game based on statistics. So make sure you don't miss that. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. And if you want to use the Bet Finder tools to study games, find really good bets, the link to that is in the description. That's where you can also get additional previews and access to everything that I'm personally betting, so you can follow along throughout the season. Definitely check it out. I'd love to see you in the NRL Best Bets membership. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video when we look at round 9 of the NRL.